Yes, Revelation chapter 13, maybe one of the most quoted chapters of the book of Revelation, because we recognize many things from that in the world around us, but at the same time it's also a chapter that is often misunderstood or not understood to its full depth. I want to read today only the first 6 verses. And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his head the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power, and his seat, and great authority. And I saw one of his heads as if it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. And they worshipped the dragon which gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? And there was given unto him a mouth, speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and them that dwell in heaven. Okay. So it speaks here about a beast that rises out of the sea. Now the outline of Revelation chapter 13 is that it speaks about this first beast. Then it will speak about a second beast, and then it will speak about the image and the mark of the beast. So we have basically these 3 sections. Now usually it is interpreted that this first beast is what most people call the Antichrist. But if you look at these words, that it speaks about 7 heads, 10 horns and all that, this is not speaking about a person, but rather about a system, and as you will see, a governmental system. But then at the same time it says that it says who is able to make war with him? He has a mouth speaking great things. That's a person. So we see that this beast is both a system, a governmental system actually, and a person that comes out of it, and that is the ruler. With the second beast, we will see the same thing. It is a system, a religious system, and a person, the false prophet. So we have to take these things apart, and then it becomes more clear what all of this means. Now this is, almost every word is prophetic in nature. It's very prophetic language, and I think I said the other time as well, I like this language because you can use so little words and say so many things. Just as we saw last Sunday in this prophecy of Ezekiel, that it's just 2 sentences. Lay on your left side 390 days, on your right side 40 days. You think not much of it, but if you analyze it, it's so deep, it has such a wealth of information. And here it is also the case. It speaks about several things, about the sea, about the beast. And I said the beast is twofold. It speaks then about 7 heads, about 10 horns. So we have many things, and what I want to do is just look at what all these separate things mean, so that we can make sense of this section here. So first of all, it is of course John having this vision, and he says, I stood on the sand of the sea, on the shore, you could say, and I saw a beast rise up out of the sea. So what is the sea? That is the first question, and actually we've already talked about this, because in his vision in heaven he also saw a sea of glass in front of the throne. And it is explained in chapter 17. We will read a bit more from chapter 17, because they are very much tied together. But in Revelation 17, verse 15, it says, the waters which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. So here you have the explanation what the sea is. This I also like very much. 9 out of 10 times Scripture explains itself. That's really something against the people that say it's all too difficult and too mysterious. It's not. It's just a matter of reading carefully. So it is peoples. The sea is people. It's a multitude of peoples. And here we have again the same phrase that we have seen several times before. It does not only say peoples or nations, but it says peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. This full description means it's global. If we see, for example, several times throughout the New Testament the term the world, the world is not the whole globe. The world is usually the Middle East, so from Mediterranean area into Asia Minor, what's surrounding Israel. That is usually referred to as the world. But when we see this type of language, we know this is global. This is global. So this beast comes forth out of the nations, out of the people of the world. That is what we get from this. Now, I said the beast itself is twofold. It is the system, a power, and actually we know it now. If you would say 15 years ago, what is this? There were all kinds of ideas, the EU and other unions of nations, United Nations of course, but now politicians use freely the term the New World Order. This is now an established phrase. 10 years ago, or even shorter, this was conspiracy theory, if you use this word, but now world leaders use this phrase, the New World Order. This is what they want to establish. That is what it is actually. This is this beast system from which this leader will arise. And this leader we usually refer to as the Antichrist. And we will look at this person as well. The term the Antichrist is not found in the book of Revelation. It's only found in the epistles of John. He used this phrase or this word, but we can actually use this term, as we will see. So we have the system, and we have this person, this leader, coming out of it and taking world dominion. And we see also that he gets power from the dragon. In chapter 12 we have seen who the dragon is. That's Satan, the serpent of old. Now then it says that this beast has 7 heads. And I think that has 2 meanings. First of all, again, that it is global. You can think of 7 heads as being the 7 continents of the world. It encompasses the whole globe. It's a global system. But it is also the culmination of all the preceding world empires. So that's why I gave this other table. You see there on the left 1 through 7. Actually there's also 8, but 8 is not a human empire. But the first one there is the Egyptian empire, the Assyrian, then the Babylonian, the Persian, the Greek, and the Roman Empire. These are all big empires that we know from history that have existed. And then the seventh is the revived Roman Empire, or restored Roman Empire. And that is what we see developing right now. So that's where we are in history at the very end. So it's 7. And these 7 are now coming to a climax. This will be the ultimate attempt of a world leader to take over. Actually, of Satan using a world leader in order to take over dominion. Now, to understand these 7, because John doesn't mention them specifically, but he alludes to it, but to understand it better, we need to go to Daniel, Prophet Daniel, because he explains 2 visions. One that is a dream that King Nebuchadnezzar has, this dream of the statue, and the other is a dream that he himself has. So the first one we find in Daniel chapter 2 and the other one in Daniel chapter 7. And we will see that these line up, and they also line up with Revelation. So we get an understanding also of what John in his vision saw. So I want to read a bit from the prophet Daniel. And these are all verses that, or pieces of scripture that we have read usually a couple of times, and we don't really pay so much attention because it's all a bit difficult usually. But you will see if we put it next to each other, it becomes actually quite clear picture. So I want to go to Daniel 2 verse 36 to begin with. That is where Daniel is going to explain the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had. Now I have to remember, this is very important to keep in mind, that Daniel lived about 600 years before Christ during the Babylonian captivity. He was there. That's why he was next to Nebuchadnezzar. So for him, the Egyptian Empire and the Assyrian Empire was history. This was no longer relevant. He was in the Babylonian Empire. So that was his perspective. That's what I put on the right side there. He looks forward from where he is, and that is the Babylonian captivity. So that's just something to keep in mind. So verse 36, he says, "This is the dream, and we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king. Thou, O king, art a king of kings. For the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom, power and strength and glory. And wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowls of the heaven hath he given into thine hand, and hath made thee ruler over them all. Thou art this head of gold." So of this statue that Nebuchadnezzar dreams about, the Babylonian Empire ruled by King Nebuchadnezzar himself, that's the golden head. It's a very strong empire, and it is only because God has given him this power, as we read here. "And after thee," so after this empire, "shall arise another kingdom, inferior to thee." That's the second one, which is the silver, the chest and arms. "And another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things. And as iron that breaketh all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise." So that are the legs. That's the fourth kingdom. And we know now from history, of course, for Daniel, all this was future, but for his history we know that this Roman Empire, is the iron, the 2 legs, is literally split in 2. That's why it's 2 legs. The Roman, and then you got the East and the Byzantine Empire. So already there is a split. So as it goes down from the head to the feet, it actually gets weaker. Then in verse 41, "And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes," so this is now the 5th. "Part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. But there shall be in it of the strength of the iron." So it has these characteristics of the Roman Empire. For as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay. And as the toes of the feet were part of iron, part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. Whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of man, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. So this final empire will be divided in itself. A house that is divided against itself cannot stand, and it will not. This last verse that we read has more depth to it, but I don't want to sidetrack too much. But then it says after that, in verse 44 and 45, that there is a rock out of the mountain, not made by hands of man, and that will crush this defeat, and therewith the whole statue crumbles and falls down. So that's why I wrote there in this table under the statue 10 toes. That's a characteristic that we see. It has 10 toes. It's made up of 10 parts, and it will be overthrown by the rock. And we know, of course, the rock is Jesus. So that is Daniel's first, or it's actually Nebuchadnezzar's vision, but Daniel explains it. Then we go to Daniel chapter 7. Now Daniel has a dream himself. We go to verse 3. And he says there, and 4 great beasts came up from the sea. So he sees the same that John sees. A beast coming out of the sea. Actually, he sees 4 of them. Now, again, remember, he is in the Babylonian Empire. It's already there. So the Babylonian Empire is not part of it. He sees beasts coming out of the sea. It's future. So that's why I wrote there in the second column 4 hereafter. That is his future vision. And that is where I disagree with most expositors or commentators. Most, actually all that I have seen, explain that the first one is the Babylonian Empire. I don't agree with that, because he has a future vision, and it will become more clear why this is so. Anyway, so he sees 4 beasts come out of the sea. They are all out of the world. They are human empires. They were diverse one from the other. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. And I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth and made stand upon the feet as a man, and as a man's heart was given to it. And behold, another beast, second, like to a bear, and it raised up itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it, and between the teeth of it, and they said thus unto it, Arise, devour much flesh. After this I beheld, lo, another, like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. So these are the first 3. Okay. So I put them there in the table on the same line as the second, third, and fourth that he sees in the dream of the statue. So it's the Persian, the Greek, and the Roman, to my opinion. Then it continues, verse 7. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. Here we see the iron that is also in the toes. It's also here in the beast. It devoured and brake in pieces, and it stamped and residue with the feet of it, and it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. And here, this is why I come with this, that the first one is Persian, the second the Greek, the third the Roman, and this must be the revived Roman. Why? Because it has 10 horns, which correlates with the 10 toes, and also from the statue, and with the 10 horns that John sees in Revelation 13. And it's a beast that is diverse. The others he can describe, he says, unto a lion or a bear or a leopard, but this he cannot compare it with anything. It's never been seen before. And in verse 8, I considered the horns, and behold, there came among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of man, and a mouth speaking great things. This exactly we read in Revelation 13. He was given a mouth to speak great things. So this, out of these 10 comes one, that is this leader, this what we call the Antichrist. If we skip a bit, verse 19, then I would know the truth of the 4th beast, which was diverse from all the others, exceeding dreadful, whose teeth were of iron, and his nails of brass, which devoured, brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with his feet. And the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the other which came up, and before whom 3 fell, even of that horn that had eyes and a mouth that spake very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellows. I beheld the same horn made war with the saints and prevailed against them. This is, by the way, we will also read in Revelation 13 a bit further, that he makes war with the saints and he was given power to overcome them. This is the same language here. Until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given to the saints of the Most High, and the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom. So there comes an end to this 4th kingdom, and actually in verse 26 it says that the judgment shall sit, and they shall take away his dominion, to consume and destroy it to the end. He goes into destruction, or as Paul writes, into perdition. And this is what we actually read in Revelation 19. This beast goes into destruction. So, and then, verse 27, the kingdom and dominion and the greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. That is the millennial reign. That is what follows. So we see the same pattern. This last kingdom, made up of 10 parts, that will be destroyed, and then follows the kingdom of the rock and of the Most High. So that's why I put it next to each other, so now we can compare and we can see actually the parallel and understand what is being told here. So in Revelation 13, if we go back there, we see that in verse 2, John says, the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. So these are the 4 that Daniel sees in his dream. The lion, the bear, and the leopard. But the 4th, it's like this, but it's not the same. Exactly as Daniel says, the 4th beast it's different than all the others. That is also what John says. It's like this, but it's then not again the same. And he is given dominion for 3.5 years. So we know that this system and this ruler will come into full power at the midpoint of the tribulation period. And I will next time make the link with Revelation 12 and 11, that we can see how these events go together. So we have 10 toes in Daniel 2, we have 10 horns in Daniel 7, and we have 10 horns in Revelation 13. If you think of it, and I'm not sure how I drew it, I didn't actually, and it's good. You think of these 10 horns, where are they? Because there are 7 heads and there are 10 horns. Where are these horns? And it's actually Daniel, we just read it, he gives it away because he says on his head are 10 horns. So it's on one head. Not divided over the 7 heads, but it is on one head. On the 7th head are the 10 horns. And that also ties back to the 7 empires that have been. It is this last one, the 7th one. That will be made up of 10 parts, from which this one ruler will emerge. These horns, they represent something, and that is also explained in Revelation 17 in verse 12. And it's beautiful because we don't need to search or speculate. In Revelation 17 verse 12 it says, "And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast." 1 hour is not literal, it's a way to say for a short period of time. So it is, they have no kingdom. These are not natural kingdoms like the nations that we have now. They are forced, they are formed artificially, so to speak. There was just like dividing the world into 10 pieces, and that's it. That's going to be given to 10 different rulers. So, and they receive power together with the beast. And we know from Daniel that this Antichrist will overthrow 3 of these 10 kings. How this is exactly going to happen, we don't know, but he will get rid of them, subdue them, as it says, and he will take full control. What is interesting is that if we look at the world today, there are many nations, and there are also unions, like the European Union and other African Union, and you have different types of unions even in Asia and in the Middle East. But there is, for a long time, there are powers at work to literally divide the world in 10 nations. What we know for sure, because it's openly available, you can find it in the internet. The Bilderberg Group, they have made up a map in the 1970s, where they divide the earth, the world, in 10 regions. And they made a plan to achieve this goal, which they call the master plan. And they've been working on this diligently, not only they, but with the United Nations, with Trilateral Commission and other organizations, globalist organizations. This map has changed over time. The borders have changed a bit, but roughly it's the same. And one of the nations, I think it's number 7, is the Middle East. And if you look on this map, which nations these are, there's North Africa, and then it goes through Egypt up, Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Iraq, unto Iran. That whole area is one nation, and these are exactly the countries where the Arab Spring took place, which began in 2011, if I'm not mistaken. And it's even going on to today, because this war in Syria and the conflict with Iran and all this is all part of it. So we see that one by one the rulers of these nations are being overthrown and replaced by rulers that have this globalist mindset. They fit the plan, the master plan actually, that is being played behind the scenes. So all this, these are not natural conflicts or regional wars. This is all planned. It is pushed from behind the scenes with a purpose. And as we were talking before about these refugees and all this, there are millions of people that are suffering because of this, and actually they have no clue why. But it's a game. It's a dirty game, but it's a game. But we know to what it leads and why it is being played. Satan is behind this. We know 10 regions will be formed somehow, and it might very well be that it is in the very last phase, before this midpoint of the tribulation, that it will actually be truly effective. Probably there are some huge wars necessary to roll out this plan fast, because it's very difficult, of course, to use small regional conflicts and politics to bring about this. Anyway, this fourth kingdom is different from all the others. It doesn't have the same unity. If you look at the ancient Roman Empire or the Greek Empire and Babylonian Persian, they had a unity, a strong unity, which was achieved by force, of course, but it was very strong. That's why you see Babylonian, the golden head, was the most powerful. But this fourth kingdom, it will be different, and it will use different means to keep the people together. It's not so much by brutal force, but as you will see, it is using economic force and religious, spiritual force. But it will be also military strong. It says who is able to make war with this beast. So there is, of course, also this. Daniel 7 verse. Well, let's start in 24, because he speaks about this fourth beast. He says, the 10 horns of this kingdom are 10 kings. So he explains it also, just as we read from Revelation 17, that shall arise, and another shall arise after them. So that is this little horn that will come and then subdue 3 of the others. And he shall be diverse from the first, and shall subdue 3 kings. And he shall speak great words against the Most High. This is blasphemy that we also read in Revelation 13. And shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws. And they shall be given into his hand until a time, times, and the dividing of a time. So we saw this phrase also the other time. A time is a year. Times is 2 years, and half a time is half a year. So this is 3.5 years together. Whereas John writes in Revelation 13, 42 months, which is also 3.5 years. The same period of time. So it's very much speaking about the same thing clearly. So in the dream that Nebuchadnezzar has, there are 5 kingdoms, because it includes himself. But in the dream that Daniel has, which is future, there are 4 kingdoms. And by using this lion, bear and leopard, John is actually looking back, because he's of course in the Roman Empire. That is his perspective. That's the iron legs, that's when he is there. So if you have these different perspectives in mind, it makes sense. So what we see in the world, politically and militarily, we have to have this in the back of our minds. This is part of Satan's plan to form this fourth kingdom or empire. That is what is behind it. One of the nations or regions is North America and Mexico. So that's the United States, Canada, including Alaska and Mexico. So you see this happening. They're speaking about this North American Union and these trade pacts between them and all this. So they work on different levels on this plan. Also in South America and then in Africa. But okay, I don't want to go too much into the politics, but it is, if you know this, you look at events in a different way. Okay, then we have the man, the beast. So this is the system, the beast system, and again we will also see that it has a religious part, spiritual part to it, but this is the governmental part, or the political part, if you will, but there is also this man, this that will rise out of it, so-called Antichrist. There is a lot of speculation about this person, who it is, and many candidates have come and gone. When the Second World War took place, many thought Hitler must be the Antichrist, but he apparently, well, he was an Antichrist, that's for sure, but he was not the Antichrist. Let's first see what this word, where it comes from, what Scripture tells about in general terms about this person, and then what it says in specific terms about this person. We can actually get from Scripture a quite accurate profile of who the Antichrist is going to be. Again, there you have to have something in the back of your mind, that he will be given power by Satan himself, by the dragon, as we read. This means he will change at some point. He's a different person before he gets this power and afterwards. I will get back to that. So first, the term Antichrist is coined by John in 1 John 4. 1 John 4 verse 3. And every spirit that confesseth not that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh is not of God. And this is that spirit of Antichrist, whereof you have heard that it should come, and even now already is it in the world. So, he speaks here about the spirit of Antichrist. And it's actually very logic what he says here, because what Antichrist means, against Christ or opposing Christ. And that is what he says here. Everyone who does not confess that Jesus is God come in the flesh, that is the spirit of Antichrist. That is opposing Christ. That is denying who he really is. And he says it's already at work. So that was 2,000 years ago. It was already at work. The spirit of Antichrist has been at work, actually, from the beginning of our Scripture already. That is always what we as believers should recognize in others. We have had discussions with people with a Jehovah's Witness background, and you can talk about Scripture, know obviously a lot about Scripture, and you can have very good conversations to us, quote unquote good, even about Jesus. But when you bring it to the point, and actually we should do that right away, that Jesus is Son of God, and that he is God come in the flesh, when you get to that, they will deny it. And they will deny it with blood and sword, because this is very much, they are against it. They learn that Jesus is a man. He's a part of creation. And actually they believe that he is Michael. So when Michael is mentioned in the Bible, they believe this is the same person as Jesus. So Mormons and other cults, they will do the same. If you talk about Jesus being the Son of God, then first they will say yes, he's the Son of God, but when you dig a bit deeper, they deny that he is actually God. So that's the spirit of Antichrist. In 2 John 1 verse 7, he repeats it more or less. For many deceivers are entered into the world who confess not that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh. This is a deceiver and an Antichrist. Same thing. That is what it's all about. If anything, if we do not confess that Jesus is God come in the flesh, if we do not, that's the core of the gospel of Jesus Christ, and if we do not believe this, then everything falls apart. We're not saved, we don't have faith. Now here, he speaks in generalities. This is the spirit of Antichrist. It's not a person. He makes it a bit more specific in 1 John 2, verse 18. There he says, little children, it is the last time. And as you have heard, that Antichrist shall come. So here he speaks about the last time, the end times, and he says, that Antichrist shall come. Whereas before he said, the Spirit is already at work. But now he says, that Antichrist shall come. Even now are there many Antichrists, whereby we know that it is the last time. So here he gives a very vague, but he gives a little hint that there will rise an Antichrist. And also in verse 22, who is a liar, but he that denieth that Jesus is the Christ, he is Antichrist that denieth the Father and the Son. So here it gets more the idea maybe of a person and not so much of a general spirit. But more specific, he does not make it until the book of Revelation, but it is actually Paul who makes it very explicit, very clear. In 2 Thessalonians 2, he could not say it more clear, I think, if you read that part. 2 Thessalonians 2 verse 3 through 9. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come except there shall come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. So this is 100% clear. It is a man. It is a person, the son of perdition. Perdition is destruction. This is what Daniel writes. He will go into destruction. Who opposed and exalted himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped. All that is called God, or that is worshipped. So it is God, our God, but all other gods as well. He exalts himself above this. So that he, as God, sitteth in the temple of God, shewing himself that he is God. Now many Christians say, but the temple here, that's the body, that's not physical, it's in you and all this. It's also true, but this is also true. He speaks here literally about a man, not about a spirit or something. He's very clear. Remember you not that when I was yet with you, I told you these things. And now you know what withholdeth, that he might be revealed in his time. Again, he speaks about a person. For the mystery of iniquity doth already work. Only he who now letteth will let, until he be taken out of the way. He's talking here about the church, the restrainer. And then shall that wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. That's Revelation 19. When Jesus comes in all his glory and brightness, it is with the word of his mouth that he will destroy both the beasts and the armies of the world. So it continues then, even him whose coming is after the working of Satan with all power, signs and lying wonders. That is also what John writes in Revelation. He will get his power and authority from the dragon, from Satan. So we have here a clear clue that it is a man, the man of sin, the son of perdition, that wicked. And what he says here about him is actually what the prophet Isaiah has written about Lucifer. And so we know also what spirit will embody this man. In Isaiah 14, in verse 12, 13 and 14, and it's almost the same words that Paul uses. Isaiah 14 verse 12, How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. So that is what Paul says that this son of perdition will do. He will oppose and exalt himself above all that is called God. So it's talking about Lucifer, about the spirit of Lucifer, but it will be in a man. It will become flesh, if you will. What is this man going to be like? It is mainly the prophet Daniel that gives us a quite clear picture of this person, so that it's for us maybe not so interesting in the sense that I believe we will be out of here by the time he rules. But there are many people that point fingers to to leaders on the world stage, political stage mainly, and say this is the Antichrist or that is the Antichrist. Well, as we just read from 2 Thessalonians, he will not be revealed yet until the restrainer is removed. So We can speculate, but we will not know for sure. But there are characteristics that we can look at from Scripture, from which we can know, in any case, who cannot be the Antichrist. In Daniel chapter 8, and I will just pick out a few verses. We're not going to read all these chapters, but in Daniel 8 verse 23, it says, in the latter time of their kingdom, so that sets the time, and it's the kingdom, we know what this kingdom is by now. When the transgressors are come to the full, the king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up. So this is this horn that will rise out of these 10. He will rise up when the transgressors are come to the full. And what does it say? He is a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences. Which means, if you freely translate it, that he will be a genius. He will be extremely intelligent. He will have great understanding. So that rules out some of the world leaders, I think. But anyway. In verse 25, it says then, and through his policy, also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. So he will come in peace. He will come in peace. He will be powerful militarily. He will have a big power behind him, but he will use peace to conquer. And this is actually in concurrence with what we read from Revelation 6, verse 1. Revelation 6, the 4 horses of the apocalypse. The first horse is the white horse, on which sits this son of perdition, this Antichrist. And it says there he has a bow, but he doesn't have arrows. So he has a weapon, but he's not intending to use it. He comes in peace. And he comes, of course, on a white horse because he is the Antichrist. And Christ comes on a white horse, as we can read in Revelation 19. And also in Daniel 9, verse 27, we read that he will confirm a covenant with many for a week, for 7 years. So he will sign, as we generally understand it, a peace deal between Israel and many nations. That's the Middle East peace deal that we hear about so often in the news. And so the fact that it's being spoken about this so often shows also how close we are to all this. So it's believed that the one who will sign or confirm this covenant will be this person. And then in Daniel 11, in verse 43, we read something else. It says there, but he shall have power over the treasures of gold and of silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt, and the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps. So he will be great in commerce, in dealing with the economic system. And this comes out later, of course, in Revelation 13, but it becomes more clear later in the book of Revelation, and I will, Lord willing, come back to that by then, because this is also ties also back to what is said about Lucifer and his fall in the book of Isaiah. So it all ties in very well. But he will be great in commerce. He will come in peace. He will be very smart. He will be great in commerce. Then in verse 36 of Daniel 11, it says, and the king shall do according to his will, and he shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god. We read this before. And he shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods, and shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished. For that is determined shall be done. What we can get from this is that he will be a smooth talker. To exalt yourself above God and make it believable to the people, you have to have smooth talk. He will be, in that sense, charismatic, although I'm a bit reluctant to use that word, but he will be convincing in his speech. And then in verse 37 of Daniel 11 it says, "Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers." That is the God of the Bible. His fathers, which means if the God of the Bible is the God of his fathers, he must have a Judeo-Christian background. Nor the desire of women, nor regard any God, for he shall magnify himself above all. Again, what Paul also wrote. So from this you can see that he will be extremely, but really extremely egocentric, because he does not regard anything or anyone. Not the God of his fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, nor any God, be it a Muslim God or an Eastern God or whatever. He does not regard any God, nor the desire of women. Many take from this that he must be homosexual. That is not what it says. But he does not regard the desire of women. If he would, then he would in a way submit to women. He doesn't. He's above all that. He doesn't care about that. He will probably use women, but he does not regard them as anything. So he will be extremely egocentric. That is one of the characteristics of this person. Then there are also some physical characteristics that we can find from this man. And that is given in Zechariah. In Zechariah chapter 11, verse 17. Most believers don't really take notice of this, but in the occult world this is very well known. It says there, "Woe to the idle shepherd that leaveth the flock." This is, we have to have the whole context, but this is talking about the same man, as we refer to as the Antichrist. "The sword shall be upon his arm and upon his right eye. His arm shall be clean dried up, and his right eye shall be utterly darkened." So he comes in a conflict, maybe an assassination attempt, who knows. But he comes in some sort of situation. It says a sword, so it's a weapon, it's not an accident. It will be in a conflict or an attack, and because of that his arm will become paralyzed, useless, and his right eye will be blinded. And that is why we see so often in the world, put it that way, this one eye symbolism. In pop culture, in fashion culture, it's everywhere. But this has occult roots because that ties back to this idle shepherd. So that will be one of the characteristics. Maybe not at the beginning, because we don't know when this will happen. It can happen later. So at first he might have both his eyes and arms functional, but at some point he won't. And also from Revelation 13 we read that in verse 3, "I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wandered after the beast." So he has a deadly wound on his head, but it is healed. It is repeated then later on. Verse 14, it says, the last part, "which had the beast, which had the wound by a sword and did live." So that is what is strange. The wound is deadly, but he lives. So it's as if he is resurrected from the dead. Remember, he is the Antichrist. He must have also a false resurrection, because people will believe he is the Christ. He is the Messiah. So this might happen in the same conflict where he loses an eye and the function of his arm. So these are physical characteristics that at least at the midpoint of the 7 years he will have these characteristics. Now this what John mentions here is very interesting, that he has a head wound. Because I had to think right away of Genesis 3:15. where God actually prophesied this already. In Genesis 3:15 it says, it's the curse on the serpent, and I will put enmity between thee and the woman, between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head. It shall bruise thy head. So that is the serpent's head that is bruised. And then you have to think of this other person in Scripture whose head was bruised with a deadly wound, and that is Goliath. And Goliath is a foreshadow, is a type of the Antichrist in every way. And so I want to look at a few, in closing, at a few comparisons between the story of David and Goliath and Jesus and the Antichrist. Christ and the Antichrist. David, King David, is a type of the Messiah, and Goliath is a type of the Antichrist. And this bruised head is part of it, this deadly head wound. So this story is of course in 1 Samuel. Again, I'll pick out a few verses quickly. So David comes there, this young boy. He's too young to be soldier, which means he's younger than 20 at that moment. But he comes to bring bread and cheese for his brethren. And then David says unto Saul, thy servant kept his father's sheep. It is very prophetic, by the way, these words. If you think that David is a type of Christ, and he is the servant. Jesus has come as a servant. What does he say? He has kept his father's sheep. That is what Jesus says. So it's very prophetic, these words. But and there came a lion and a bear. So here we have again the lion and the bear. The same that Daniel speaks of, the same that the Revelation speaks of. They are already defeated. He has defeated them. And then he says in verse 36, this lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine, being the Goliath, shall be as one of them. So that is exactly what Daniel says. What John says in Revelation. The beast is like unto a bear, and like unto a lion, and like unto a leopard. He isn't the same, but he's like unto it. And Daniel says more or less the same. So that we find it here as well. So here we see already a link between these stories. Now in verse 50, we see Daniel prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and with a stone, and smote the Philistine and slew him, but there was no sword in the hand of David. So here the head wound is applied. What it says there, the head wound, and it kills him. Now, Goliath is a giant, so he has Nephilim blood. He has supernatural powers, and we know, especially from pre-flood situation, that these beings could not easily be killed. They could regenerate themselves. So the only way to make sure that he was dead was to cut off his head. And that is why in verse 51 he takes a sword and beheads him. And so that is what we see the same in Revelation. When this leader comes to the scene, he has this deadly head wound, but he lives. It is until the end when Jesus comes with the sword of his mouth. That's the sword, here in verse 51. With the sword of his mouth, he kills him. And then it's over. Goliath is not a human being. He is a Nephilim. The beast in Revelation is not a human being. He will begin as a human being, but once Satan himself gives him all his power and authority, he will no longer be human. That is the whole reason why he's consistently called the beast and not the man. Paul calls him the man that goes into perdition, the son of perdition. But he is a man, but he will become a beast. That is also the reason, we will get to that in Revelation 19, why the first and the second beast are not judged. When before the white throne judgment, when everyone is judged, all knees shall bow, they are first thrown into the lake of fire. They are not judged. They are not human. They are beyond redemption. So that applies also to Goliath and to all the giants. That's why they had to be eradicated. So there are similarities. Then there is, of course, a big similarity, because in Revelation 13, verse 18, it says that the number of the beast is 666. And we can read that Goliath was 6 cubits long, tall. He had 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, and his spear weighed 600 shekels. So it's all sixes around this man. So this points also to the beast of Revelation. So when he appears on the scene, for those that are around then, that know Scripture or have access to it, they will know at some point. This is what the one Scripture spoke about. This is not the Christ, this is the Antichrist. So the dragon gave him his power. It actually says 3 things: his power, his seat, and great authority. From that moment on, he will no longer be human. And it reminded me of what we read in Genesis 10, when we went through the genealogy of Jesus, and we had the sons of Noah, where Ham begot Cush, and Cush begot Nimrod. And then from Nimrod it says he began to become a mighty man on the earth. He changed. He was a man, but he began to become a mighty man. A gibor, it says in Hebrew, which means giant. He changed. And he began to be, and it's in Hebrew, it's halal. This change is halal. And it means to become profaned, defiled, polluted, desecrated, ritually, sexually, and or genetically. So it has all that, this word. And I believe it has all that. I believe so. So if you think of this verse in Genesis 10, where it speaks about Nimrod, and you translate this word, you can say Nimrod began to change genetically, becoming a gibor, a giant. The offspring of the watchers of the earth, it says then, the fallen ones. So with that in mind, it is very possible that it will be technology and genetics that will be involved also here, because Satan is not God. He cannot create anything. He has to work with what God created. And we've looked at this before, so we won't go into it now so much, but we see that he's using technology, helping, inspiring scientists to come up with things that advance his plan. And we saw it with the opening of the bottomless pit. And so I think it has to do also with the change here in this Antichrist figure. He is coming out of the sea, out of the people. So he is a man, but he changes into something that is inhuman. That is this beast system and the first beast. And so, I said, we'll look then next time at the second beast. I put another column on this table here, Revelation 17. So we get to that later, but that is this second beast who is spiritual in nature, but it's also a religious system, and it's a religious leader. He will again be different than this first beast. But why I put it next to it there is that we see that these toes, these 10 toes, as Daniel described, they have iron in it. And this is the same as the legs are. That's the Roman Empire. That's why we usually speak about the revived or restored Roman Empire. So it is something that was, and it will be again, but it will not be the same. So that's terminology that we find in Revelation 17 that has also several layers of meaning, but one of it is this. It was, that's why I printed it there a little bit bigger. It was, it is not, from John's perspective, it is not, but yet it is. So it's going to be it's having the characteristics of the previous empire, but it's not the same. And specifically on the religious, in the religious sense, this is very true, as we will see. In all cases, when it's Daniel 2 or 7 or Revelation, specifically in Revelation 17, we see that after this, or out of this 10-toe, 10-horn empire, comes one person, and he will be destroyed, and then follows the millennial. So it's the rock, it's the kingdom of the saints in Daniel 7. In Revelation 17 it speaks about the Lamb. And so we see, and of course Revelation 13, we see the end of it in Revelation 19, followed also by the millennial kingdom in Revelation 20. So it's very consistent. The 8th kingdom will be the millennial kingdom, the kingdom of the King of Kings, Jesus, who will rule on earth. That's why in Revelation 17 it speaks about the 8th, but he's gonna try, but it's impossible. The 8th will be Jesus, no one else. And it says also there he goes into destruction. That's the second beast, so we do that next time. We leave it with this for now. Amen.